and we also
C'est toi que là, Ethan?
Faro and Faro.
Non, non, c'est pas moi.
And those tools
Il
will
est peut-être.
explain how we want to we want those tools to be available for researchers and developers. So first, I'll just present ourselves. So Alex is an IoT engineer at NVIDIA in the Hermod team, and I am a researcher in the same team. We work in the Hermod team. So Hermod team, so a bit of context. We do research mainly about software engineering. So we work on languages and virtual machines. For us, the IoT part, so IoT and a bit of robotics, it's a means of applying the results of our research. So from our research we build tools, and with those tools we target the IoT domain. So for things, it's a set of tools for remote development of your IoT application. So mainly prototyping, but also batch debugging, testing, and deploying your applications. And I will start with an example. So as I said, in Hermod we do software engineering research. So we are not roboticians, and we can prove that. This is our robot that we built. So we bought stuff on the internet. So we have a Raspberry Pi here. So if everybody knows, which is inside. We have motors, we have some sensors, and on that Raspberry Pi, we have a Faro application that is running. The goal is for that robot to drive autonomously and avoid obstacles. And we were a bit late this morning. We just arrived to see the robot avoiding obstacles on the race. So you will see the enormous difference with our robot. So we have a small video there. The robot is hidden there. He's trying to avoid those small boxes. Does that work? Yes. So here's the robot. He starts and he tries to avoid the box, and he fails. So this is that's a Faro application running on there, and so we have our algorithm to avoid the boxes. So we have to fix the algorithm. So we fix it, and there is another try, and he hits the box again, and last try. So this is the same setup, but seen from behind, and there he's a bit more successful there. So there we again change the algorithm.
Non, c'est Louis.
See? Can stop and try avoiding the obstacle.
That's the rugby kind of avoiding.
So what's interesting there, it's not our inability to write a robotics algorithm. It's the fact that between each time, you see, it's of course we move the robot, but each time we change the algorithm, we did that remotely by accessing the running code on the robot and fixing and experimenting. So we do that with Faro things. So this is what we are going to present: our tools to prototype and remotely develop your IoT application. So here, in that case, we see the robot as a machine with IoT devices. Of course, it can be different in the robotics world, but we target mostly IoT applications. So I will just describe a bit the tools so that you understand what we're dealing with, and then Alex will show you a video of the tools in usage. So the first thing, because I said we were fixing the algorithm, here this window is the class browser of Faro that we have on our computer, and the code that we see here is the remote remote running code that is running on the Raspberry. So when we change, you see the IP address because in that version we are connected through Wi-Fi. When you change the code that is here, you're actually changing the code that is running and that is dynamically updated in our case, in the robot. So we can write classes, because Pharo is object-oriented methods, and we can change this code while dynamically while it's running.
So it's Smalltalk code.
Yes.
Pharo is Smalltalk.
Pharo is a Smalltalk derivative. So all the tools actually looks like what exists in pure Smalltalk. Then once you wrote or you change the code that is running, you want the means to see what's happening. So you have another tool which is named the remote inspector. This is an example of inspector, and with this inspector you can observe the state of your running program. You can see the objects of the program. You can see the instance variable. You can change them. You can send messages to the object or write script. This is, for example, an inspector that is opened on the physical model in the running application of the GPIO board. So here you see it's exactly the same. Here we have something. It's like this. We have something that is plugged on that pin, and we can see what is this pin and the state of this pin. So here it's green and out. That means we are sending a signal on that pin. And as I said, you can script. So this is, for example, a little script. We don't care about the code, but it's the script that creates, setups the physical pin and the signal on the pin. So we can inspect our objects, our live objects like this, change them, request, make queries about their states, and we can see what's happening. We have also what we call the remote playground. So this window, again, this happened on your computer, and here you can script things, and that will be executed on the remote IoT device. So you can create some local state and execute code, and also query information about your running system. You also have a remote debugger. So imagine that happens actually on the robot, because between each video, when we were changing the algorithm, sometimes we introduce bug, so there is a problem. So instead of crashing, it just opened a debugger on our computer. So this is an example of debugger. And we can fix the code in the debugger, click proceed, and it resumes the execution with the bug fix. And we have that very little simple cycle with the developer, that when the developer needs, he or she can connect to any number of remote devices. So here we connected to the robot, but you can connect to multiple IoT devices at the same time. You develop, test, debug, and until you finish, and you disconnect when you're finished. And if you need, you can connect again and continue developing your IoT application. So now let's see that for real. Alex will.
Yeah, I will show the video about the demos, and I will explain a bit what you are going to do. And just to remember, this is simple demos just to see how the program works, how we can do the minimal. And what we are going to see now is the minimal to see like the Pharo works with the device, with the Raspberry Dynamic. So the first example is a dynamic update. And the scenario is we have one, let me just stop here. We have one Raspberry, like that one, and it is running the old code, and we need to connect in it when the program is running and change this code and update the board. And how do we do this remotely? We don't need to stop the program. We don't need to turn off and take it. You just connect it and use these tools to do that. as Steven explained. And this we are in the local machine, and we are just connecting the Raspberry and start the server, the Faro, just to show. And now you are connecting remotely and inspecting the board. This board is the old model of the board. You can see there's only 26 pins. And now you are open the remote browser. And in the remote browser, there's the IP there of the device, and you can see all the class, all the packages, all the methods. And now you are going to create a new class to this new board. Create a new protocols to organize it. And now we pass the code of the new board with the map of the pins, and we compile it. And it's okay. Now it's a red one. You can just use the new board model. There's a cat there. And look, this is the new board, the new model of the board with the 40 pins, and you did this like lively, and you can start to use it. And in this example, we are just running the script to create activate the last pin, not the last, but the one of the last one, and it's already working, and everything is remotely and live. And you save the code. And now you are just to keep the file just to see the persistence, because to see the code saved, and we start again, of course.
Looks pretty much like having a distant Smalltalk running. What more than just having X window with the windows appearing on your computer and the process running on another computer? What did you do more than that?
So the point
Because what I see is essentially what I know from Smalltalk for 25 years, but the screen on which the windows appear is not the same as the one is not connected to the computer on which the process is running. Besides that, I don't see what you did more than that.
Well, the thing is that first it's a tool, so there are different means to achieving the same result. Then it's embedded on another Raspberry Pi, and maybe what's a bit tricky is that this is actually a computer. It's not a real embedded card, but it's on other embedded cards you don't have necessarily everything that you need, or the power or the network available to do remote desktop visualization. So behind that, there is behind the fluorescence there is three or four theses. There is the proxy model that was a thesis at École des Mines de Douai. There is the remote interaction model that is, I don't remember the name, it's named Seamless. That was a thesis at Hermod a few years ago. There are theses about microkernels. How can you have minimized Faro, Faro image and VM running on the and from all this research we implemented that too. So this is what's different. But it's from a perspective. I mean
Smalltalk was embedded on, for instance, devices 30 years ago. It was already used for embedded programming. Smalltalk.
But have you seen fully working systems such as this one for remote development with Smalltalk? again, this is a tool that we.
I think that given that you have a Linux running on that, if you have a computer with the X Windows system, I would like to understand what is different from what we've done compared to having Smalltalk running on a Linux on the Pi and
just
displaying on a
the-
remote display.
Because you display the desktop with it in your use case, or at least in the stream.
What is the what do you call the
You're
desktop?
speaking about having something like VNC and remote viewing the
Yeah,
X.
the screen, the windows, the X windows are not seen on a device attached to the
Yes,
Pi,
yes, yes.
but
So So-
on your computer.
in that case,
Okay.
we only have the VM running and
Okay.
the operating system. So that means we don't have any
Okay,
requirements.
so
about-
you have rebuilt some kind of a protocol to exchange information so that you can view it on the computer.
so you
Yeah,
can
you-
communicate. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And but remember, this is the tool that we present.
Mhm.
So that tool, for example, you have for Arduino, you have remote debuggers. So
Mhm.
you have also remote tools, and you don't have an X
Indeed.
server, etc. We
Mhm.
presented the tools here. We are presenting the tools, not
Okay.
the differences.
I see.
Okay, I see. I also understand now the difference. Maybe something that can be another answer to Jacques' question. Can you manage many embedded systems at the same time? So I imagine that in an IoT scenario you have plenty of cards everywhere in the world with sensors, and so are you capable of managing all those quads in the same environment?
We can. I will do a 2 times answer. We can connect to many different devices at the same time and observe their state and do everything that we presented. So if you have let's say 10 devices, you can connect to the 10 and do whatever you do with the 10. Now, if you have 10 devices with 10 different operating systems, with 10 different variations on the, for example, on the
GPU.
setup or on the hardware.
Mhm.
Now we don't have the tools to do that. You can do it. For example, you can connect to different versions of the Raspberry Pi, which have different models. This is why Alex showed you the different kind of boards. But basically, you have to do it yourself. You have to create your new board. You have to
Mhm.
eventually. No, just stating the current state.
But do I understand correctly? You have one object for representing each card, one card,
Which
one object in Smalltalk
Yes.
representing one card, one embedded system. Correct.
Yes.
So
Yes, we
you
have
can
one of that.
instantiate many,
Yes.
and so okay. I understand that of course you need to have the specific.
Yes.
The specific VM and etc. and model of the card, no problem. But so you can manage your global architecture within the same
Environment.
unique environment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You can. At least you can build it.
Yes. Yes.
And just a precision, the object that represents the board that we show, it's the model of the board, and we can have model of different board. But on top of that, you have your application, and your application also have objects.
Mhm.
And for each object of your application, you have if you ask for it, you have a remote view of that object, and you can also inspect it. It's because I showed the inspector of that, but there's also you can also see the other objects of your application.
So if I understand well, it means that you have some kind of a proxy object on the computer that has exactly the same state as the one on the board, and each time you act on the object that you have on your computer, the protocol under is in charge of propagating the changes on the object that are on the board.
Yes.
Okay, that's a big difference
Yes.
with the,
Yes. Big.
the X window scenario.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the proxy model that is implemented it was a full thesis that was done in 2014 in École des Mines de Douai by Mariano Martinez Peck. And this is an implementation of his research work. So we have a direct transfer from the research to the tools. Maybe I can let Alex continue. Yeah. It's that.
And now I will show other demo to see the interaction with the objects and open the object and inspect the object, the remote object in the local computer. Maybe it's a good demo to see and to finish some dots. And this is to editing the remote code and objects. And again, this is it's a simple scenario. It's an application with 8 LEDs, and the application is just to follow the LEDs. And you are just starting this application, and you can open the object here in the local machine and change the properties of the object live, and you can connect and change the code remotely while the object, the program is running. And I will show this in this demo. You are connected. This is my local machine, and I connect remotely in the one Raspberry. Open the browser, and this is the app, the program. There's the PIO and the instance variables. This is a method to say the speed of the lights are going to blink. And in this application, in this example, we can set by method the times they are going to flow and the direction it are going to flow. If it's left or right, and so you can start. This is only to see how it works, and when you start, they will do this 2 times, go and back. And you set it on to left 2 times, and they are going to do this.
So to be clear, if I understand well, this code is executing on your computer.
No,
It changes objects that are on your computers, and the changes are reflected on the board.
so this
Or is it that the code is sent and executed on the board?
this is sent it and executed in the board.
This is because this was the second tool that I presented for the last one.
Yes.
This is a particular tool from which you can script directly on the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This is other tool.
But here, for example, here it created local temporary local variables, and so those are in memory on the Unix program. But we can, I don't know if this is in the demo, but we can inspect that object and see its state and change it. Actually, I think that's the demo.
This is in the demo. And just to see this running, and we are going to put like 1,000 times to repeat, just to have time to inspect. And now we are going to inspect this object and to see the properties of this object.
So now that we know, this is a local representation of the remote object.
And here I can see the parameters of the object, the time to peak, the direction, and the process running. And I'm going to set change the instance variable to R, and they change the direction. And I'm manipulating the remote object. And here, if I refresh the window, I can see the updated state of the object. and I can manipulate this remote object as I want. And in this point, I can close my laptop and the program still running in the Raspberry. I don't need my laptop. It's just to do the changes and I can save and still run remotely. I can see change all the parameters too if I want. And now in the demo I'm going to show the change of the code because you change the live object and now you are going to change the code while the program is running. I'm going to change this method, return the delay and you can put like as you want. And when you compile, they compile this remote, and the program accepts the change and it run live. Put 1 second as well. And after you can just continue to do what you want. You can change more the object, you can save, or you can just turn off the local computer.
I understand. I know pretty well how Smalltalk works, so I understand everything that you're saying. It's
nice. So now Steven will talk about the architecture, and maybe there's some question.
Do you have a question about the demo?
No, just a point maybe, but I don't understand the difference between the last thing you present just now and the part just before. So I don't understand what's the difference between changing the code and changing the state of the variable. It's the same, no? Isn't it?
In Smalltalk it's the
Yeah,
same because
that's why
code
I'm
is
not
in
sure
an
to
object
understand.
that represents a class, and so if you change the object that represents the class, you change the code on the platform. That's consequence of
Yeah, except
the
that
synchronization between the two.
So if we project a bit, changing just the value of a variable, it's cost less than changing the state of a class that needs to recompile a method into the running system. So
Okay.
this is different from that point of view. And from that point of view, we for now we compile everything on the running system because Smalltalk. But of course, we are more and more thinking of because there are research on that topic to compile locally and just upload the updated compiled code that exists. So, but this is, for example, a difference. And then if you just upload the compiled code, it's not exactly the same as changing the state of an object. So it's not changed the same way.
The impact on, I would say that, I don't want to go too deep in the arcane of this, but in fact, I would say that the only impact that we'll have is that when you have the Smalltalk compiler running on the same platform, it will be able to connect with the state of the stack, of the running stack.
Yes.
If you do the compilation remotely, it will be much more difficult to see where you can restart the execution in the new code, because the compiler is smart enough, and when you recompile a method, to know that if it stopped at the second line, for instance, of the method, and recompile, you get a new code, it will try to see what it means to be at the second line in the new code. Okay, and if you don't do the compilation on the same machine, you would lose this possibility to know that in the stack you were executing that method, you were at the second line, and you want to restart at the same place in the new code. And that's probably I would say, I'm not sure it's not a thesis to do, but it seems complicated to be able to communicate the right information if you do the computation remotely.
Yes, in the other way you will gain speed. And there's also the question of multiprocesses program.
Mhm.
So when you are in that case, it's not sure you want to recompile on the running program and at the same time trying to find where you can apply the update.
Mhm.
So for example, the research that we have at Hermod about dynamic software update, the
Mhm.
compilation is done remotely,
Mhm.
and then the tools looks for the right moment to insert the change. It
indeed.
depends on what you're looking for.
Mhm.
And that's the tricky part.
Yes,
I would say that's
yes.
very tricky.
This is very hard.
That's at least a thesis. If you want to do that correctly,
And,
yeah, it's at least a thesis.
and it's not only technical, we have a lot of research to do.
Yeah, it's tough.
And I'm not going into details into the architecture, I just want to show the big picture. A few words about Faro first. So it's a small talk, we have a virtual machine on which we execute an image, and the image, to simplify, it's the program, it's your program. And this couple, virtual machine and image, it's deployed on your developer computer. So you have a virtual machine that is dedicated to your operating system, and that part is named the client. And we deploy again that couple on the IoT devices or to the hardware, and then again you have specialized virtual machines to run on your device, which we call the server. So this is the basics. Then we don't need to go into every detail. On your client, it's your machine. You have all that IDE things and the tools that run on top of the operating system. So here we use, I don't know the details, but we used some primitives of the operating system for communication and with the server side. So this is your computer, and this is your Raspberry. You can have many Raspberry, many servers, as we said before, many devices, and you have a similar tool stack on the server, and your user application inserts in the middle. So it uses various things, for example, to communicate with the GPIO and access the sensors, etc. Your user application and the development tools, and they communicate through the communication layers, which includes proxies
And if I understand well, Faro Things is the interface between Faro and each of the platforms
Yes.
you run on.
Yes.
Okay, to abstract away the platform.
Yes.
Okay.
And the first thing is IDE, it's the tools. Okay, so this is basically what happens. So you have similar architecture on different on the demos and on the systems. And here, what we did not mention is, for example, that of course what you will plug onto your GPIOs, you will plug sensors, and for each sensors we have a model of the sensors which is implemented server side onto the Faro Things library. So this is a bit of a downside, but I don't know how to do if we don't have one model for every sensor, because for basic sensors it's okay input output, but for a lot of sensors you have a specification, you need to communicate through specialized protocol. So each time we add a new sensor, we have to implement it into the library.
It's even harder than that. You have a lot of non-functional properties on sensors that are very important also. It's not only input-output, indeed. There's no-
So that part is a bit tedious. And one other tiny thing is that you don't need your server to be a mirror of your development environment. That means that you can connect just with the tools any running device that has Faro Things, because you will always see the code remotely. I mean, see the system that is running remotely. So, because here I did this arrows, but it's not that clear. what you deploy here is not the same as here. You don't have that constraint of having the code running the same as the code on your computer. Okay, so we have a few projects that are made with Pharo things. Here are some technical projects. So that some of these projects, they are to prove that we can use the tool suite. And some other projects, they are for teaching yeah, basically teaching and showing the tool. So here, we don't see well, but we have a coffee machine. We opened it up and we remove the cables and we put on cables, and the Raspberry Pi is there. And then we can order coffee to the coffee machine. We even
Essential.
this is the purpose of research.
Have coffee.
We put a web server on the Raspberry made with Pharo also, and we can use Siri. And with Siri, we can ask for a coffee, long, short, whatever. We have our small robot. As you can see, this is the future to avoid obstacles. And then we have projects that were made in the industrial workshop, because we'll speak a bit about it. Some companies, they are interested in the project, and this is, for example, a wine. Yeah, but the name of the c'est un tonneau. And inside we have wine.
No.
And the Raspberry Pi, what does it do? It measures the levels of wine. What does it do, Alex? Yeah.
It drinks wine.
So you know when you need to refill.
Very important.
That one is a bit more serious. In that company, they need to press a button to open the door when they have a visitor. And the problem is that the button is far. So you have to get up, get to the button. And they plugged Raspberry with Pharo things, and they use Siri to ask to open the door when they have a visitor. So these are more technical projects, as I said, for teaching and demonstration. We have some research for which we use, I will not go into too much details, but for us, that tools, it's a support to experiment research results, or to do experiments. So I don't go to too much details, but here we use Pharo things as support to experiment debugging tools, because we have a remote device, and in most scenarios it's that we can't access the device, so we have the need to debug it remotely. So then we have different constraints for debugging object system. Okay, so these are small examples, object-centric debuggers, debuggers that we can control. So for example, we have a PhD thesis actually in R mode, where the goal is, for example, to script the debugger, to ask the debugger to stop before an exception is raised. So we can detect that an exception is going to happen, and before it crashes the system, for example, if it's an uncaught exception, we stop and we open the debugger, and we can choose to interact with the debugger to continue, discard execution, etc. And also, we have another PhD thesis. The idea is to shrink virtual machines and the Smalltalk images. So we have very small images. So for example, the standard Pharo image is 20 megabytes, I think. So it's not suited for IoT. But when it's shrinked, it's the first result of that PhD. It can be like 30 kilobytes. So it's a bit better. But now, you have 30 kilobytes. Of course, you don't have the compiler, you don't have the debugging tools. So what do you do if you actually need to debug a system that you cannot access? These are examples of research at Armor.
Are you considering the debugging multi-thread?
Yes.
This
is
okay.
our, at least,
that's a huge problem.
and also the distributed, because this is a use case for it. Today, this work is supported mainly by a company which is Weidenker, a German company, and the Pharaon Consortium, which regrouped 27 industrial members and 19 academic partners, so many universities and some French schools. And this support the development of PharoSync because so we have, of course, a global interest of the consortium, but also Zweidenker wants to build real project with it. So they support the research on the tool and the implementation of cost of the tool. Now, you could build your own projects. Even the students, they could build their own projects. If I can summarize, we have fast and live prototyping, but remote. So what we can see is that we can quickly prototype, but it's not always, the prototype is not always the final application. But what Zweidenker wants to do, for example, is that from the prototype, they can go to the production application and really deploy a PharoSync application on one real product. And the debugging, the remote debugging, and the continuous development aspect are, to us, very important aspects. Now, Alex will speak a bit about the actions we have about how we can show and teach PharoSync in a different.
This is some some places we did some workshops and we did some lectures and tutorials, and this was the place we did the lectures. First one is in Vietnam, and we have been there to do a 1 week live program with PharoSync. Was in Canton University, and the other one is a bit dark, but it was in Vietnam too, but in Hanoi with the Professor Serge, and the last one is here, in the 2 weeks ago. And in the Polytech of Lille, we did the lectures to introduce introduced into IoT and to Internet of Things and to remote development. And this is some workshops we did. The first one was in a conference in Italy in the last year, and in the middle is in Zweidenker, is the company they support the PharoSync, and was a hackathon in the last year, and we did this in 1 day, and in the morning was the lectures and showing how the things works, and in the afternoon was we split in the groups, in 3 groups, and they created some projects, and the project of the door opener and the other one to measure the wine was created in this hackathon. And the other one, the last one, is the Vietnam 2 in Hanoi, and we are doing some workshops there. And in the next year, we have this program conference is in Portugal, in Porto, in March. And if you wanna go there, you are invited to go to Portugal. And we are going to do a workshop there too.
So just to precise, of course we can come, but it's an international conference, so we have registration fee, so you're not actually invited, but you can come. And this is the dates of the conference, but the tutorial is on one full afternoon. So,
and in the documentation, we have the booklet, the address of the booklet, the installation guide. We simplify a lot how do you install all the environment in the Raspberry and your computer. And we have the lecture slide. We use these slides here in the last lectures. And this is the web links if you want to access. And this is who is contributing with the PharoSync. We have Denis Kudryashov, he was the original author. me, Alex, I'm working now in project to improve the tools and to maintain the project. Marcus Denker is one of the owners of this Y Denker, and he's German, and he is a senior researcher in India. Stefan Lucas is the leader of the team. Steven, the researcher, and Serge Stinkwi. He is French professional and he's in Cameroon now, but he supports a lot the Faro and the lectures. So, the Faro thinks you can dynamically update your running board. You can have your code run, your objects, and you can update things dynamically. You can interact with your pins and different kind of boards and make your chains persistent. And you have all the environment to code and to debug remotely. So this was a presentation about the remotely live coding. So thanks, and do you have any questions?
Well, I can have many questions, so I start. Maybe I have a feeling there is something missing, but it's many, but just due to your presentation. But and this is related to the question I was asking in the first time. There is nothing to, I don't know how to say, to visualize, to manage a global architecture as a whole. I mean, a distributed architecture. I don't know if there is something, I don't know, tool set, or I don't know what exactly, but something, because in my opinion, this is the most difficult part. You have very distant, possibly very distant objects with very distant functionalities, and you have to manage them as a whole, okay, into your final application. So of course it's not represented. Your example are not so representative of this problematic, but yes, in the end, this is what I imagine when I think about IoT. Is wow, very wide application, sensors everywhere, and so I saw no concept and tools to simplify this development of very big application.
No, because we don't have that yet. For now, we believe that it is possible to build it, but in an ad hoc way with that tool. But we have nothing that will help you supervise an IoT network or fleet or etc. And we also have, as we speak, the problem of the, if you do that, you have the problem of now it's a distributed system, so how do you debug it with those tools extra? And so from a technical point of view, I'd say that we are not there yet. From a research point of view, we started last year, well, in the beginning of last year, to work on concurrency and multi-threaded debugging. So, for example, we will go that way on research, and we try to apply our results to the tools. But this is.
And Faro, does it have any constructs for explicit constructs for doing distributed programming or? No, not yet. So that would be the first probably thing to do.
Yes.
Because if you want to represent something,
And
you have to.
yes, and maybe another point I want to underline, but when I also think about IoT, I cannot imagine you have an application that is not capable of representing and dealing with networks. I mean, you may have very different networking facilities in such application. You can have Wi-Fi, GSM, I don't know, whatever you want as protocols.
So this is why I said on the architecture that we rely on some primitives from the operating system for things such as communication, because we have an abstraction layer that is the Telefaro thing that you can see, and this is just the abstraction. So we know how we can communicate, but then the physical way, let's say like this, we use the system. So the system has to provide us with the primitives, and then if you connect to Wi-Fi, you can connect through radio waves. So, but this is managed by the system.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I can just give you the answer in your own presentation. You represent GPIO, and you could let it to the system, but you do not do that.
Yes, because there we are targeting IoT. So for doing IoT devices, this is important.
I admit.
Then we could choose to represent because when you model your board, your GPIO, this is your GPIO, and you know your device. But then I don't know if we can model having a verification of every communication protocol that is in fact very low level. Because from the application point of view, from FaroSync, we do not care that it's Wi-Fi.
In fact, that's probably you are talking about something that is a war between, I would say, people that more closer to the hardware and the computer scientists that always want to abstract away from the hardware. And in fact, I think that the experience that comes from the world of robotics says that, in fact, your algorithm have to care about the properties of the services that you are using. So indeed, you do not want to represent the precise protocol that is used. But in fact, you cannot abstract away from the fact that you are using a very reliable network, for instance, on some cases, and a highly unreliable network at some other point. So for IoT, you will have a lot of applications that will depend upon the performance of the network. So probably it's not the case that you would like to represent the details of the implementation, but at least you need to have information about the properties that may impact either the performance or even the functionality of your application. Okay. If you disconnect, if your application assume that you never disconnect, it's not the same as if you have a network that disconnects all the time.
Yeah.
So
which is actually the case. We assume that, and we have that problem.
So I think that it's always the same. I think that there is a close connection, in fact, between these kind of problems and the kind of problems we have in robotics. Is the fact that we cannot abstract away from exactly the properties of the hardware that we are using or the services that we are using. And now the question is, what is the right level to represent what is important? What can we abstract and what we can't abstract, and we have to represent and work with it. That's the basic difficulty.
To complete that, because we are not defending any position, we're just stating what we did. And as I said, we are from the software engineering world, so we like to not care about everything.
I know that.
But we think that our
the
research...
motto for 50 years. We don't want to care.
We think that the research that we do can have application. We see that there are problems in that because you said we feed on problems. And in IoT, especially distributed IoT, you find many interesting problems. We think that some of this research and the tools can help the people in this community, but we are not from the IoT or the robotics world. So we are presenting that, and maybe we can enter this world if we have such feedback like this, and we are very interested to know what are the properties that... I would say the major misunderstanding between computer scientists and the roboticists or IoT people, those that have to care about the hardware, the fact that as a computer scientist, I know that for 50 years we have tried to abstract away everything. We have abstracted the processor and then the memory and then the network and then everything, okay? That's fine, that's fun if you can. And we have abstracted away the energy consumption and things like that. But nowadays, we want to apply computer science to areas where we cannot just say we can live in an abstract world where
nothing is counted, nothing is important. We have to tackle now this problem. It's the same, you know, in computer science, they had in robotics, they had a lot of problems, a lot of fight with the people coming from the multi-agent systems. And mostly, the problem was that in multi-agent system, you don't have any connection with the physical world. And so you abstract so much away that your solution do not apply. And for instance, from what I've exchanged with people in robotics for 15 years now, I know that an algorithm that works for a set of hardware will not work with another set of hardware with the same functionality. Okay? So you change, let's say, a LiDAR for a camera for the same functionality. You will have probably to change your algorithm to take into account the fact that you don't have the same hardware, it does not have the same property, the same constraints, etc., etc. And so, as computer scientists, we were trying for 50 years to say we can abstract everything under an interface, and now they are coming back and saying, no, it does not work. So that's important, and if you accept that, then